As you become executives, the soft-sided skills become the hard skills that we have to understand. And the hard skills are seeing things that others can't see, asking the better questions, having emotional intelligence, being a great communicator, listening, empathizing. You've got to future-proof your skill set on those behaviors. The leadership is the ceiling of the business. And if we can't break through those ceilings, that business is going to be stagnant. That business can't grow to the maximum that it should.
Welcome to the Leadership Disrupted podcast. Today we have with us Monty Wyatt, who is the CEO of Adding Zero's Executive Development. And he is one of the top coaches in organizational development. In 2025, he was ranked as the #3 global guru for organizational culture professionals. And with over 25 years of leadership, business, and personal development experience, Monty works with executives and leadership teams focused on scaling performance and impact. Monty is somebody with a wealth of experience. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think we have so much in common, and yet we have very distinct differences as well in terms of our experience and our backgrounds. And Monty, what I'd love to do before we deep dive into what you're seeing in the leadership landscape, maybe just fill in, some of the story about your background. Like, tell us who you are, who we're listening to, and then we'll dive right into the conversation.
Sounds perfect. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to have a good conversation with you and look forward to our topic. I'm an Iowa farm boy. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, went to Iowa State, studied agricultural business, and went to work for a chemical manufacturer after college, and lived in 6 or 7 different places, made it through 3 mergers. After that 3rd merger, the leadership just wasn't what it needed to be. And they didn't communicate well. They didn't cast vision. They just didn't influence us well as an organization. So after about 4 years of that new company, I left and I started this business because I wanted to help organizations think differently about leadership and management and how you influence others and how you get results from others and that they want to get, because people want to be successful. And so for the last 22 years, I've been working with CEOs and executive teams on strategy, implementation, leadership, management, how we influence our organization to achieve objectives that they want to achieve. And in many cases, they don't know what they want to achieve. So we define that, and then we help influence the organization to get their buy-in and get their engagement into achieving those goals.
That's fantastic. And essentially the thesis of this podcast, Monty, is that the role of leaders, the expectations that employees have of leaders, those expectations are evolving and shifting, sometimes in obvious ways, sometimes in really subtle ways. And even as we're asking more of our leaders, I think we're also putting them under a lot of pressure to do more with less, to work faster, to do more complex work, process more information, basically do more. And at the same time, we're not necessarily giving them the time to be the better leaders that we need them to be. But that's my thesis, my theory. I would love to hear your take on maybe what you've seen over the last 20 years in terms of what leaders need to be to meet the moment, like the moment we're in right now, and maybe also going into the future. I guess, what kind of changes have you seen?
It's interesting. I define leadership and management maybe a little different than everybody else. I define leadership as it's influence through passion and focus. And I define management as it creates competent and productive people. And so I think over the last 20 years, leadership has changed from a command and control scenario where the person in charge has all the answers and they give the direction and people go and do what they do, to now people want to be engaged. They want to have influence on the future. They want to have input. And even folks right out of college, they want to have influence into an organization's success. And so we've got to allow them to have that influence. But as senior leaders, senior executives of organizations, sometimes we have to let go. And I think that's the challenge that we're in today, is that they don't want to let go. They like to be that one that has all the answers, and they want to have that. I don't like the word control, but they like to have that word, that control of what they're influencing and how people are doing things.
And I would say, I understand that desire for control, and not in a, control really means you know which levers to pull. You have some power over the output, or over the outcome. And yet as you read various surveys related to employee engagement, the truth is, over the last 30 years, every like national and global employee engagement survey is indicating that engagement is notching downwards year after year, decade after decade, even when employees, they come out of college or whatever education they go through, and they want to make a mark. They want to be seen. They want to do, nobody wants to do bad work, including leaders. Nobody intentionally wants to be a less than optimal leader. But something about either our habits or the way we're structured is just getting in the way of leaders letting go, leaders giving over some of the power, some of the control, having the trust to do that. I don't know. Like, what's your take on the root causes of that unwillingness to let go a bit?
You mentioned engagement surveys, and I think a big root cause of the decrease in engagement starts at executive team level. And they need to look at themselves. Instead of saying the employees aren't engaged, how are we as an executive team engaging them? And so I almost look like it's not an engagement issue, it's an alignment issue, where the executive team knows where they want to go, they know what they want to create, but they aren't aligned with the rest of the organization, and people don't know how they fit into whatever it is the executive team is trying to create. Everybody needs to know how they fit into the big picture, and they want to know, and they want to be a part of that success, just as you mentioned. And so we need to get them aligned and allow them to feel that success and be a part of that success.
And yet we treat it very mechanically, almost like these are just human leg blocks. Well, I hired you to fit, like, here's how you align. I'm deciding you fit here. And then this other Lego block fits here, and this other Lego block fits here. And we never ask the Lego blocks, what do you want out of this? What are your strengths? What are your ambitions? What are your aspirations? How can we make this Lego set work for you, not just for us? And I do think that's a whole different mindset than the typical historical, 50s, 60s, 70s command and control. I'm giving you a paycheck and benefits. What more, what more could you want? I'm hiring you to do the job, so you do the job. I don't know. Does that resonate with you? Or do you have a different point of view?
No, I think that's exactly right. People want to be a part of something, and they need it. I think the biggest role of leadership is how you're teaching others how to think. And we teach others how to think by asking the right questions, by causing them to reflect, by causing them to come up with their own answers. Instead of me being the answer giver, I'm teaching you, how do you think about this? What are your options that you came up with? Instead of me giving the answer, I'm helping you think through the different ways that we can approach this, and what's the most effective, what's the best way to move forward that's going to get us closer to that outcome that we're after.
Monty, you mentioned self-awareness. Man, there's potentially a lot to unpack there, because now maybe it's just my own limited experience, but I think most of the leaders that I have engaged with, both as an employee and as a partner, a client partner, man, I think self-awareness is one of their big challenges. They don't see themselves the way other people see them. Um, First of all, does that resonate with you? And how do you help build self-awareness in a senior leader who's got, people around him or her, who's got a bit of a bubble around him or her, and everybody's probably validating, oh, your ideas are incredibly insightful. Your thought process is so fantastic. Your jokes are funny. Your everything is great. I mean, you don't have a lot of senior leaders who invite um, alternative viewpoints. Not that they don't exist, of course they do, but for the most part, either consciously or not, they surround themselves with validators and executors. I want you to validate my vision and make it happen.
And when they do that, they're not developing that next level. So when they retire or they move on, they've got to go external to the organization to fill that seat because they didn't teach them how to think or how to be a leader themselves. And that self-awareness point is huge. And it's a challenge. That is a skill set that is needed. With AI today, there's so many things that AI can help us with, but it can't help with self-awareness. Only we as humans can do that. And only we as humans can influence others to help make better decisions, to help do things. That's the critical skill of the future, is how we recognize how we influence others and how we understand ourselves better and what others see about us that maybe we can't see. And when we don't see that, we're building walls. We're building walls around us that, that the yes men are just following us in line. They're going to follow us off the cliff if we don't allow them to share their viewpoint. And when I work with clients, that's the biggest thing that I work with, is the entire executive team, to have them grow together. And when my clients have 6, 7, 8 on their executive team, we rise together to think through, how are we influencing the organization? How are we aligned? How are we challenging each other? How are we developing our team? How are we growing ourselves? Because most of the time, the business outgrows the leadership. Mm-hmm. And so if the leader isn't growing or changing, that business is going to outpace them. And the leadership is the ceiling of the business. And if we can't break through those ceilings, that business is going to be stagnant. That business can't grow to the maximum that it should.
Decades ago, I was up for a promotion at a previous employer, and I was a relatively young guy in my mid 30s, and full of vinegar. I mean, I was a hard worker. I was a pusher. I was a driver, and I was driving myself, and I was driving others, and I was hitting all of my marks. And I was and a new position opened up, and I absolutely knew that, I mean, I was the perfect fit for that role. I interviewed with confidence. In fact, I was already doing a lot of that work, so I couldn't imagine that they wouldn't pick me. And it turns out they didn't pick me, and I got so pissed off. And they didn't want to lose me. And the reason I share the story is because they did something for me. They said, Dan, we don't want to lose you, and we think you would benefit from some executive coaching. And I immediately bristled. I was like, I do not need an executive. I do not need a coach. And they said, here's what we are willing to do. We'll just give you a budget. You can pick the coach. You can spend the money in any way you like, as long as it's self-development. So if you want to go to a couple of workshops, fine. But it's enough of a budget where you could afford about 6 months of executive coaching, and it's up to you. And so I did find an executive coach, and I would say our first couple of months together wasn't great, because it was all about validating. He let me bitch and moan and complain, and he let me do all the stuff that a guy does. And then we started to get to really know each other, and we had deeper conversations. And then at about the 4-month mark, I think I really relaxed, and opened up. And the point of this conversation is there was a point at which he saw something that I really didn't see in myself. He said, Dan, I've talked to a lot of the people that you work with. Everybody says good things. Nobody really has much to criticize at all, except that you're so damn serious. You are it's like your ambition is getting in the way of your ambition. And he said, even our relationship, it took 4 months for me to break through your wall. Like for you to crack a joke, for you to smile and have like a human connection. And I said, and he said to me, once we cracked through that, what I found is that you're actually fun to talk to, a decent guy. There's a lot going on, and you're funny. But nobody at work would know that. And he said, so what I'm going to recommend you do is bring that lighter side of Dan Rust, that funny side of Dan Rust, into the work environment. Let people see that you're quick with a joke, that you're quick with a clever banter. Enjoy these conversations with people. Now, that was his guidance. I think I spent 2 years trying to evolve toward that. It's not easy. It is not easy when your entire self perception is about, I'm a serious driver, but I am the person that I am today because of that. And he stayed with me, and I evolved. And I can say, Dan Rust today is very different than I would have been if I hadn't made that shift or change. So I'm a big proponent of executive coaching, but I also know how hard it is. I know to help people see a part of themselves that they don't currently see. How do you do that? So I know that's a long story to get me to my question, which is, how do you help people see themselves in a way that they maybe don't see themselves right now?
I always ask the question when I start a relationship is, what do you want to be known for? And we dig into that. And sometimes they talk about yourself. I want to be the professional. I want to be successful. And I keep digging deeper with the, why do you want that? What are you really saying? Who do you really want to become? And the skill that I think is so important today is vulnerability. And it's vulnerability is not showing all your emotions. It's not, well, it's really expressing who you truly are. That to me is what vulnerability is. It's expressing who you truly are. And so many people are out there, they've got this persona that they want to have in the business world, and they're not letting themselves be vulnerable. They're not showing their true selves out in front of the world, because they want to have people know that they have everything going on, or that they're the most successful. We don't have to have all the answers. And I'm going to tell you, the most successful executives, CEOs and executive teams don't have all the answers. They ask the best questions from their best people to get the right answers. And that's what a great leader does. And so when you start out with asking, what do you want to be known for? I really challenge that. I help them dig deeper to what are we trying to accomplish because of those words, because of that description, and how do you want to live that? And it's changed so many lives by asking that question and really getting people to act differently because of that question, because they aren't as vulnerable as they think they are.
That there's so much to that question, because as you really think about it, do you really want to be known for, I'm the guy who achieved 30 million in EBITDA? Am I the guy? Do I really want to be known for this set of OKRs? Is that my legacy? He met expectations. He met or exceeded expectations. I think obviously most of us would hope that we're known for something more than that. One of the questions, after I'd kind of broken through the humor and the lighthearted humanity thing, what was great about this executive coach, who he's passed away now, but what was great about him is that he never let me settle. So I was actually feeling good about, hey, I've kind of brought this more lighthearted version of myself, and it's, it seems I enjoy it more. They seem to enjoy it more. And then he said, I'm going to give you a question that I suggest when you have this round of performance reviews coming up. As you are giving performance reviews, how about wrapping things up, leaving yourself enough time to ask this question? How am I, Dan, how am I showing up for you as a leader? How is it working for you? And asking it in a way with enough time. Don't wait until like, oh, we got 30 seconds left. Rate me on a scale of 1 to 10. No. Give it the time for them to think about it and share with you. And he said, ask this question this time. Understand that if you haven't asked these kinds of questions before, you're going to kind of scare people. They're not going to know what to do, what to say. But in the next set of quarterly reviews, ask it again, and then ask it again, and pay real careful attention to the tone and how this question is landing, so that you draw out from them, sure, what you're doing great. Yeah, that's fantastic. But draw out the comments like, well, because you have a habit, Dan, of showing up to meetings late, that kind of sets a certain tone. Or you have a habit of meetings with you always run long. Or we've learned to adjust. When you say you'll have X done on Friday, we know that usually means Tuesday. And whatever those comments might be, Dan, when they start to share with you those just modest areas for improvement, understand how much that means and how hard that is for them. And so then I practiced that, and eventually I came to realize they do have the answers. Like, if you create the right, safe environment, they will tell you the kind of leader that they need. And when I was feeling kind of good about that, I mean, many months later, I was feeling, hey, I've grown a little bit. Then my coach says, so sometime this weekend, ask your wife how you're showing up as a husband, and do it with the same. Understand, the first time you ask that question, you may not get, a lot, but you will eventually get a lot. And so he just kept pushing me gently, but pushing me to grow. And I, again, I feel like I lucked out because I had someone who was willing to see me in a way that I didn't see myself. But I have to imagine that it doesn't always go easily with the leaders that you're coaching. I mean, how do you guide them through that initial resistance? Because we all have a kind of a coat of competency on. Oh, I'm the leader. I was hired for this position. I'm at this level. Of course, I'm competent. And that maybe we don't realize the bubble that we're creating around ourselves. How do you help leaders maybe crack through that bubble and be a little more human?
I do a couple things. And the first thing I like to do with an executive team, CEO and their direct reports, is I always do a retreat to talk about where the company is going, what we're choosing to have as our direction. So we're all aligned, we're arm in arm on where we're headed and what is the biggest priorities that we have to be successful in to achieve that. And then the conversation is, how do we have to grow as an executive team to achieve that? Where do we have to learn skill sets in our decision making? Where do we have to learn skill sets in how we're developing our team? Maybe it's hiring our team. Maybe it's getting the right people with the right skill sets. And so it's twofold, because you got to grow the people to grow the organization. And I like to start with the organization to talk about, where do you want to take this organization and what do we have to learn to get there? And I've got so many examples of businesses where the organization had outgrown that leadership because they hadn't had that conversation of where are we truly taking this business. And we have that retreat. We decide what our core values are. We decide what our direction is, our priorities, what we want to be known for as an organization. And then it's the deeper conversation. How do we have to grow? And what's holding us back from getting there?
So these teams that have been working together, assuming for quite some time, these senior leadership teams, how do you find those dynamics to be? Really, the question under my question is, this might be my limited experience, but almost every team of senior leaders, as I've gotten to know them, man, there are so many stories under the stories, motivations under the motivations. There's so much, like yes, on the surface, everybody's aligned. Everybody's got, aligned with the vision and the values. Some are very, motivated to promote themselves. Some are motivated to feather their own nest. Some are, I have found it hard to kind of crack the code. But again, that could just be me. Like how do you find it when you bring a group of 5, 7, 8 high-powered people together, and you want them to have a retreat where they open up as quickly as possible? Do you find that happens relatively easily, or I guess share with us your experience of that?
I start every relationship before that retreat. I interview each person one-on-one as an executive. And I tell them that this is a conversation that I want you to be true and honest with me. I want you to tell me what's going on, what's within you, what's working for you, what's not working with you. And so when we get into this group setting, this retreat, I want you to feel comfortable in sharing those things. And I'm going to call on you if you're not bringing something up that you mentioned to me that I think is valuable to that conversation. And I build the trust with those executives to open up. And I think that's the power of some conversations, and why I love bringing executive teams up together, because everybody's got challenges. Everybody's got self-beliefs. Everybody's got some awareness to gain. And we can't grow the business if we're not true to ourselves. If we're telling ourselves a story, or we're not living by what we say we are.
Any particular examples you can share with us? Either great examples of how you brought a team together that was disparate, or we all love hearing war stories too, where things just blew up on you. Any particular stories that come to mind?
Well, I've got a couple, and I'll share one where the CEO and I do this for every retreat. I talk to the CEO because he's my number one client.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that we're accomplishing what he wants to accomplish, and we're getting the outcomes that we're after. But I'm always challenging him to watch his team on how they're behaving during the retreat. Are they the executive they want them to be? Are they in the right seat? Are they committed to the organization? And I had this one client that I worked with for about 2.5 years. And after that first retreat, the CEO, well, I should say, before that retreat, the CEO thought he had the best team. He thought he had the greatest team that he could ever have, and people are in the right seats. After that retreat, he's like, I don't have half the team I need to have. That some people weren't as committed, or they weren't as big picture minded as what he thought they were. And so within 12 months, half of that room was changed by the CEO, because they weren't the thinkers. They weren't willing to grow. They weren't willing to get out of their comfort zone to become what that CEO needed them to become to fulfill the direction of the organization. And so just because you're on an executive team, if you're not willing to grow and change and be a part of that new organization that you're trying to build, doesn't mean you're going to be there forever unless you're growing. And that's the challenge. But another example I love to give is this one organization. All 4 of the executive team, there were 4 on the executive team. The previous executive team all retired at the same time. So these 4 new people were all in new seats, and they were just said, just do your job, you'll be fine. Well, they had never been taught how to be a leader, never been taught how to be a manager. So we started from scratch one. We started from scratch. we defined direction. They had never set goals before as an organization. So we had to bring clarity and get alignment and have people challenge each other on what is it that we're trying to create. And that took a long time because they didn't know how to do that, or they didn't know what they could achieve. They didn't know what they could create because they were so stuck in the day to day of the business that they couldn't see what the possibilities were. And so at the end of that 2-day retreat, they were all in a new mindset of that we can create new things. We can see a new way. And each of them were willing at that time to grow and change. Now, over time, a couple of those people did change as well, but it still got to the point where people were learning and growing to become what the business needed them to be to hit those long-term goals that they were after. And that's the openness that someone has to have. If you're going to be a leader, you have to have a learning skill. You have to have a willingness to change and be a better leader and become better aligned.
Now, Monty, you're based in the Midwest in Iowa, and I would imagine many of your clients are organizations based in the Midwest. Not all of them, of course. I mean, I know you have a much broader client base, but I bring that up because I wonder if many of these Midwestern legacy companies that have proud histories, they were probably started 1 or 2 or 3 generations ago. They know their story, they know their history. Change can be very hard for those kinds of organizations. And generally, change doesn't start on the inside. It starts when the world outside is changing, and then we're forced to respond because the world is shifting, whatever that world might be, in whatever market the company happens to be in. But I don't know that that's true. I perceive, now I live in the Midwest as well, but I perceive many legacy Midwest companies as being so steeped in their proud history, legacy, that it's almost a blind spot. They don't even see how resistant they are to evolution or to change. But is that just my perception, or do you see something similar?
Well, I do see something similar, but I believe that the organizations that are going to be successful in the future, you can't just think like a business owner. I might be the 3rd generation. I've got to think like a CEO. And a CEO is guiding the whole organization. They're responsible for strategy. They're responsible for having the right people on the team and to ensure that we're all moving in the right direction. I might be 2nd or 3rd generation, and the 1st generation never taught me those things. And so I think that's a critical skill of, if you want to continue growing, you have to think differently. Instead of being that 3rd generation business owner, you've got to think as a 3rd generation chief executive officer. And we have to grow in the skills. And so whether it is a first-time CEO or not, you've got to change your behaviors to think about, how am I leading this organization to a different place than what the past has shown? But when you have that, you certainly can get those people that are not willing to change. And that's the fun part of what I do is I work with people that want to change. and that's the best part, is they want something better. Either they're wanting to grow faster, they've hit a ceiling, they don't know how to get there, or they're growing so fast that their inside can't keep up with their outside. And that's the power of getting the right people in the right room to talk about, how are we or how is the business a reflection of us?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine one of the greatest challenges for senior leaders, when they start to ask the question, do I have the right seats? Do I have the right people in the right seats on the bus? And they start to recognize, no, there are some people who are just not the right person, right seat. Maybe there's a different seat for them, maybe not. But I wonder, how challenging is it to actually pull the trigger, to actually make the move? It's one thing to recognize, okay, Joe may not be the most AI savvy technology specialist, even though he leads our IT team. He may not be all of that, but he's got good people, and he's been with us for 20 years, and he's part of the family. You can talk yourself into keeping anybody. How do you help a leader understand that being too nice is the wrong word, but being too human short term or nice, like if you retain somebody in the wrong seat, you're not just doing a disservice to the business, you're generally doing a disservice to many other people as well.
Absolutely.
But those have got to be hard choices, hard realizations for senior leaders to arrive at.
I've got a client exactly in that scenario right now. It's a newer merged business, and the CEO of this organization is recognizing that they need a new executive team member to lead sales. And they've got some people on their team that are really good. They're influential, but they don't have the strategic mindedness to lead sales. They don't have the skill sets to lead senior sales, but they're great people. And this leader is so empathetic. He is to a fault. And we had this conversation last week, and I said, you've got to make these decisions for the betterment of the organization, because you employ 300 employees, you're responsible for 300 families. And you've got to make decisions that are good for the future of this organization, not just one person. And so as we talked through that, I asked him, what skills does this person have that you like? What skills do they need to be successful? And what are the gaps? To achieve what you want to achieve with this organization, can those gaps be filled? And the answer was no. And so he says, I know, I care about people. I'm very empathetic. And so he knew the answer, but it was that reinforcement of, you got to make the decision that's best for the future of the organization. And that's the tough part. People are thinking of today and not tomorrow.
Well, and I think there's a value in that person having someone like you to have the conversations with, because if you're just processing it in your head, you can have all the same thoughts, but there's no urgency. There's no one holding you accountable to, hey, you said these words last week, or you said these words 3 weeks ago. What's the plan? I had a situation where a client CEO asked me to conduct a confidential 360 feedback survey on him, and surveying his top 40, not his direct reports, but one beyond the direct reports, like top 40 functional leaders within the business. He wanted their feedback on a number of things, and what he said to me is, I feel like I'm not feeling the pulse of this business anymore, and I don't know exactly what that means. It's just more of a feeling than anything else. And he said, we do employee surveys every year. However, what that company did was they leveraged their own platform for employee surveys. And if you were savvy, you could tell that they could track your IP address. And so all he was getting was, happy talk. He wasn't. And so we agreed to do a completely confidential survey on a separate platform. And then we agreed to ask a couple of questions where employees could respond anecdotally, because their previous survey was all scale of 1 to 10, scale of 1 to 10. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's okay. Well, we can do a couple of those, but let's ask, what blind spots does the CEO have that you think he should see? And it was actually 3 questions. What are the CEO's strengths? Like what is his superpower? Give people a chance to say nice things, but then ask, where's his greatest need for development? And then the money question, what are his blind spots? Mm-hmm. And so we surveyed 40 people, 18 responded because they were so used to not being authentic. So I had to make phone calls to the non-responders to reinforce confidentiality, to explain that there's no way your responses are going to be tracked in any way, shape, or form. We're not even going to cut and paste direct. We're going to take your responses and we're going to filter them so that we give the CEO the feedback, but it's in no way can it be tracked to any human being. So with all of those assurances, I think we got 38 out of 40, something like that. Feedback comes back. two biggest themes from the feedback related to two of the senior leadership members. And everybody had fantastically nice things to say about one of the senior leadership members, except that he wasn't very useful, didn't really create value. Just a great guy. Everybody loved him. Great guy, great team builder, but just doesn't create value, but finds a way to stay in this business, primarily because he was hired into his position by the other senior team member who people did not have nice things to say about. People had some very challenging feedback regarding her, how she works to keep her world safe.
Yep.
My point is, lots of feedback with lots of details, and it was my job to come back to the CEO, share the results, which I did. I let him sit with it for a while before a week later, we had a conversation about it. It made him so uncomfortable. I remember this to this day. He gave me a lecture on loyalty. He said, the thing I'm known for is loyalty. I want my people to be loyal to me, and I'm loyal to them. And they've been there when I need them, and I'll be there when. So he said, I'm not someone who throws people under the bus. And he went on, and essentially nothing changed. Nothing changed. And he felt good about his sense of loyalty to a senior team. And where I fault myself is I didn't have the language like that I just heard from you. I didn't have the language at the time to help him see that your loyalty to them is getting in the way of your loyalty to your employees, your loyalty to your customers, your loyalty to your board of directors. What you're basically saying is they are at the top of my hierarchy of loyalty. Everyone else is below that. And in reality, a CEO should be shifted. Your hierarchy of loyalty probably should start with my customers, then my employees, maybe my board if I have a board of directors, and then my senior team. I know it's counterintuitive, but they should be last. That's the nature of that job. But what I took away was how hard it is to make hiring decisions that impact people that you really like, people that you've grown accustomed to. It's like kicking someone out of your tribe or your family even. I don't know. Does that prompt any thoughts?
I want to encourage to your audience here that doing 360s is an important exercise, and you should do them every few years, because if you want to continue to grow as a leader, you need that input. And when I do 360s with clients, I do the online surveys as well, but I like to interview folks one-on-one so I can ask those questions. I can see how they respond. I can go deeper. I can ask probing questions to say, how has that impacted the business? How's that impacting the team? And so we do find the positives. We also find where their gaps are and what their blind spots are. And then I bring the themes back to the organization, to that leader, to say, let's focus on these themes. This is what I heard from half the audience. This is what I heard from half the respondents. And this is the message that we need to grow in. And that's a great tool to get buy-in. And one of the exercises that I love to do after the 360 is the person that was given the 360, they need to go and visit each person that did the survey. Whether, like you said, if there are 40 people and only 30 of them responded, you're still going to go to all 40. You're going to go to all 40 and say, thank you for your feedback. And these are the two actions that I'm going to take because of that information. And that makes it real. If you're not going to implement, if you're not going to act on it, then don't waste anybody's time. And you got to have that conversation and coming back to them and saying, number one is thank you for your feedback. It was very helpful. I don't know what you said. It was confidential, but these are the two actions I'm going to commit to because of that. And I want you to hold me accountable. That's the wording and language that I challenge my clients to do when they do 360s, because they have to grow into the position.
It honestly had just not occurred to me that one could do a 360 feedback survey or assessment human enabled. But it makes total sense. It makes rather than having people sit at their screens and fill out 3 questions, having a discerning human like yourself to be able to hear the tonality, to explore a bit further, dive deeper, ask follow-up questions, and really get a sense of the reality under those responses. That's so much more nuanced, and I have to imagine so much more effective in terms of driving real change.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's, you get people to open up, and again, my role, and I tell this to every client, my role is not to go tell other people what somebody said. My role is to help each of you grow together, and we can't grow together if we're not willing to have the tough conversations. And without the tough conversations, we're not going to be successful. We're not going to achieve the big dreams that we have. And so the best executive teams are the ones that are open with each other, that do recognize the strengths and the gaps that each person has. And we have fun with it. We grow in it. We know that we're working on it. But if we're not willing to see that, if we're not willing to do that, the organization, we're like I said before, we're the ceiling of the organization, and the organization won't break through.
Are there, in your experience in doing this for so many years, are there any, I guess what I'd call common themes that tend to occur fairly frequently where, I guess anything that you could share about that?
Some themes that I see a lot is number one is communication. Whether it's to the organization or one-on-one, people want feedback. People want to know what your perspective is of my performance. And at that level, a CEO may not give as much feedback as they should be giving to the executive team, because they're making an assumption that you're an executive team, you're on the executive team for a reason, because you've got a certain skill set. And I'm expecting this, and don't expect this from me. That's kind of the mindset that I see. But the best leadership teams, the best CEOs are the ones that are giving that feedback. And whether it's communication or whether it's the challenges that they're going through, how they respond, if they're reactive versus proactive. And that's another area that I see a lot, is people bring up that they need to be more proactive in growing the business or anticipating challenges that are in front of us.
I think that a lot of senior leaders, they got into that position because they are doers. They make things happen. They drive change. They may not spend a lot of time on people, but and then as you move up the ladder of leadership, you can find more and more reasons not to spend as much time on people. And yet, as you move up that ladder, in fact, your impact on people can be bigger. I mean, well, actually, no, it is bigger. Even if you are choosing not to spend time on people, that choice has a big impact. That tells people what you're all about, like it or not. If you're assuming, you'll motivate yourself. You don't need positive feedback from me. I hired you to get a job done, just like I was hired to get a job done. You don't need me to be your cheerleader. But we're all human. We all every now and then we all need someone that we respect to say, "Hey, good job. You are on the right track. I like that. Maybe this not so much. Maybe this we could take a different direction." But if we wait until it's an emergency, or if we wait until it's a fire that has to be put out, by then it's probably too late. But
it's a disservice to that individual and a disservice to the company, to the organization. If you're waiting or you're not giving the feedback, it's a disservice, because our role as leaders, and I really believe this, our role as leaders, no matter at what level, is to help the next level be as successful as possible. And that's how I, again, define leadership and management differently. Managers are responsible for making sure people are competent and productive and are becoming the best that they can be. Leaders help with that energy, that emotion, that side that's to influence others. And if we're not growing in both leadership and management at that higher level, it's not going to be good alignment. It's not going to be the results that we're after.
One of the last bits of coaching I received from the gentleman I mentioned before, my executive coach, he's introduced me to, well, he's basically asked me this question. He said, what are you as a leader seeing that no one else is seeing? What are you perceiving? Because if you're just seeing what everyone else is seeing, that's not bad, but it's not special.
Yeah.
What we need from leaders is to look around corners, to see things that others don't necessarily see, to take lots of information in and process it in a way where, oh, when you turn it this way, here's what I understand about our customers, or here's what I understand about our market, or our technology, or our value proposition, or our people, or it can be whatever. But if you don't create a difference, if you don't see something that others don't, you're maybe not creating as much value as you could be creating. And it was a hard question, but I remember it to this day because it made me realize, okay, part of my job as a leader isn't just to get things done, isn't just to drive change, but to bring my mind into this and keep looking enough to see things occasionally that others don't see. And I know that's got to be hard because that requires a lot of mental energy. It requires a lot of time spent paying attention, researching, meeting, talking. It takes a lot. But I imagine that's one of the challenges many of your senior leaders have as well, is devoting the time to be able to have that insight that others might not have.
I love that trait that you bring out because I think there are what I call you got to future-proof your position. And the only way to do that is to grow on the soft-sided skills. As you become executives, the soft-sided skills become the hard skills that we have to understand. And the hard skills are seeing things that others can't see, asking the better questions, having emotional intelligence, being a great communicator, listening, empathizing while being stern. You've got to future-proof your skill set on those behaviors. And so many times the executive team, they're the smartest guy in the room, and that's what they're known for, but they aren't leading and they aren't changing the way their future needs to be.
I'm amazed at the number of businesses that during the pandemic, they shifted to either a virtual or a hybrid mode. And then because they could make things happen virtually with some cost savings, they decided to maintain the virtual presence, at least for some significant portion of their employees. And yet, as far as their approach to leadership, essentially all they did is they gave people webcams and microphones. And
Right.
They never really addressed, because all the stuff we're talking about is all true. And then in a virtual world, you have to be that much more intentional about it. You have to be that much more attuned to the feedback people are giving you, the subtle signals, the obvious signals. The guy who always asks a lot of questions suddenly goes quiet, paying attention to what's happening with him. The lady who normally shares her thoughts and ideas or her creative processing, suddenly she's not sharing as much as she used to. Paying attention to all of those subtleties in a virtual world it requires great leaders to be that much more intentional, because back in the non-virtual world, when you're all in the same location, as a leader, you can walk down the aisle of cubicles, you can kind of feel the buzz. You may not be conscious of it, but your mind is processing the clickety clacks of the keyboards and the buzz, in the room. Who's in the break area? Who's showing up to meetings? What's the demeanor of people in meetings? You can do it as a virtual leader, but it is a specific skill set that I think most organizations just kind of blew past and said, hey, he's got a webcam, he's got a microphone, you've got Teams or WebEx or whatever, just continue, just carry on. And then they wonder why our employees aren't as engaged as they used to be. Right. And they think it's because of remote. It's not because of remote. You can be just as engaged in a remote world as you are in a physical world. with the right kind of leadership guidance. Do you have a fair number of clients who are still in remote or hybrid work situations, or have most of them moved their employees back to the office?
Most of my clients, they've moved back to the office because they did recognize the culture was gone, or the culture wasn't what it was before.
Yeah.
And even people can say that we're more productive working from home, we got more done in less time, but you're missing the teamwork aspect of it. You're missing the collaboration. You're missing the open communication of, like you said, walking down the hall and having that conversation that I can't just have when I'm sitting on a computer
Yeah.
miles from somebody else. And so it is a different world, and you've got to try harder to be that leader. And I think it's those soft skills. You got to be intentional at growing them.
So Monty, you've spent 2 decades doing lots and lots and lots of these kinds of retreats, executive coaching, et cetera, et cetera. If I was a CEO or other senior leader listening to this podcast, and Monty Wyatt were to give me 5 minutes of free executive guidance, like right in this moment, what kinds of insights could you share that would be essentially universally applicable based on what you've seen from so many different kinds of organizations? Either what are the common misses of senior leaders, or the common strengths that you've seen in great senior leaders? Any of that. If you'd give us 5 minutes of free executive coaching, essentially to a universal group,
Absolutely.
what would you share?
I always believe that alignment is the most important thing. The companies don't have a strategy problem in most cases. They've got an alignment problem. And what I mean by alignment is, and it's not just agreeing, that's not just alignment when you agree. Alignment is that we're arm in arm, that we make decisions the same way of how we're keeping in mind the customer, or how we're keeping in mind the objective or the future of the business. And so alignment can be how we communicate. Alignment can be what our responsibilities are, what expectations are. Is everybody under the same expectations? Are they clear? And I think that's the powerful thing is, are the incentives the same across different departments? Are they conflicting between departments? That's alignment. And so my biggest challenge that I would have to the audience listening is to think about, what alignment do we have working for us, and where are the gaps? And I've got a great assessment that I'll give the website to here in a few moments. But I think it's important that as you think about growing your business, start with the executive team and how aligned they are, get them aligned, and then move to the next level of the organization and ask the same question. How aligned are we on the strategy, on how we're implementing, who's doing what, how we communicate, and how we follow through? And the accountability needs to be a part of that alignment conversation. How are we holding each other accountable to what we say and commit to?
And if at that senior level you have people who are not aligned, you may not realize it, but employees know it. They see it.
Absolutely.
They experience it, and they don't like it. It really does get in the way of a feeling of engagement when you feel like my leaders aren't in this together. They're not.
They don't know who to
this
listen to. They don't know who to trust.
Yeah. And so that is fantastic. And I will make sure in the show notes we include not only a link to your LinkedIn profile and your website, but anything that you share regarding assessments, et cetera. I'll make sure we include that in the show notes as well.
So
I want to be
the website that I would encourage you to go to for a free alignment assessment is coachmonte.com/podcast.
Okay.
coachmonte.com/podcast. And it'll take you about 4 minutes. It's got 10 different points of the assessment, and it will give you areas that you're going to have strengths in. It's going to give you gaps of execution or strategy or communication. And I think that would be a great place to start for everybody on the call.
And if you're listening and not able to write that down, just go to the show notes when you can, and we'll have a link to that as well. CoachMonty.com/podcast. So, Monty, I want to be respectful of your time. This is fantastic. Really, this is really good. You've been very generous with your thoughts, your examples, your insights, and I'm sure there are going to be some people who would like to continue the connection with you. So we'll make it easy for them to connect with you online and follow up with you. And I hope this isn't the end. I mean, I think we will have ongoing conversations in the future, and see where that takes us. Any final quick thoughts?
It's the world has changed, and I think the leaders of the future have to continue to grow and recognize what their strengths and gaps are. And without doing that, the world is going to change again, and we may not be in it.
Yeah.
And so you've got to continue to grow your skill sets and not let your business outgrow your value that you bring.
There was a book in the 90s, I think it was, called Change or Die. And that may be kind of severe, but in reality, evolving is no longer an option if you want to stay in the game, for sure. Thank you so much, Monty. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Dan, thank you very much.